My guest today is David Kammerer, and I'm actually really excited about this conversation because you and I have not hung out much. Tell everybody where we met recently that led to this.
So I was traveling, and I think it was pretty early in the morning, and we were in the airport, and we were in an airport lounge, and I saw Ken, and I'm a relationship person. I'm like, you know what? He doesn't look like he would mind if I just went up and said hi. So I went up and said hi because we know each other for many, many years, going to your compliance training and things like that. But like you said, we've never been close, but lots of respect and knowing about each other. So I just struck up a conversation, and we got into hey, maybe we should get together and chit-chat about some things.
Yep. Yeah, it was funny. I mean, I was on my way to Romania at the time, so I was kind of in the zone of like, I'm going to be out of the country. I'm disconnected from everybody here. And then I got that connection right there in the lounge where I was like, this is awesome.
You were in a really good mood.
I was. Yeah. Well, I had a mimosa. When you're flying internationally, mimosas are like how you start your day. So
that's exactly right.
But yeah, it was a cool time. And I just knew immediately, I'm like, I need to talk more to this guy.
Well, it was already 5 o'clock in Romania, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah. I think it's 10 hours at the time it was. But yeah, I definitely wanted to reach out, and then we tried to film this. This is our second time trying to film this because we did one over Zoom that the internet was so bad that I'm like, you want to just drive up?
Don't always count on the internet.
Yeah. So you live in Eugene.
Yes, sir.
Right? You've been mortgage business wise. You've been in the mortgage business how many years?
It looks about 29.
About 29 years. All right. So that would have taken us back.
94.
94.
Yeah,
and I got
in
into 98. I only remember 98 forward. So 94 was...
The 90s were interesting, but 94 was not unlike this year or last year, where I think in late 93 rates were in the low sixes, and by the summer of 94 they were 9.5.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but there were still people with 13% mortgages to refi back then.
Everybody wasn't at 2?
Yes.
Yeah.
There was nobody at 2.
What got you into the business?
It's interesting. Thanks for asking that question. It was mostly about a desire to do something bigger in my life, and I was actually a manager at a credit union.
Oh, wow.
I liked the idea of helping people with finances, but I was desperate about making more money, and I actually went to a counselor, and they made me go through a bunch of tests, and they came up with 2 or 3 things that I could do that didn't require going back to school, which I couldn't afford the time or the money because I had a family, and one of them was mortgage. And I'd always been interested in it, and I literally went out and talked to every mortgage guy in town. I'd already bought a house, so I know a realtor or 2, and they gave me some names. And there was a guy that hired me, and we sat down, and he said, hey, I told him it was about money and career, and he coached me on how many loans I needed to close per month to match what I was already making. Well, I want to exceed that. And what I didn't know is the number. He said, you got to close 4 or 5 units a month, which didn't seem like much to me. At that time, I didn't know the national average was under 2. No, and what's funny, Ken, is that anything you do, if you don't know what you don't know, you just go do the work.
Yeah.
So it was a very interesting time in my life, but that's what got me into it, and I never looked back.
You said you didn't want to go back to school or couldn't go back to school. What had you done in school? Like, where did you go at that?
Yeah, I'd been up through standard college stuff. I went to a community college and went to Oregon, and I studied business. I actually studied physics and all this other crazy stuff because I was good at math, but my favorite subject was business and economics history, and it kind of relates a little bit to what we do. And there's something else that I think is key if you really care about where my journey started, because I relate this to people. But one, I had a house buying experience at one point before I became in the mortgage business, and it was a horrible experience with the mortgage lender. And it was a referral from a realtor, so I'll never forget that. And I'm like, I'll never let anybody feel that way.
Yeah.
And then also, I remember being a kid and taking a home economics class, and in that class we learned there was a statistic from HUD. I think it went like this, that people whose parents were homeowners were 40% more likely to succeed the kids. I remember asking my dad, are we homeowners? He goes, well, we are and we aren't. And then he explained to me that he had a VA loan on a house, but yeah, we owned the house. In which, yes, we were homeowners.
Wow.
But that homeownership is stability, and so it's a big deal. And subsequent to that, I've discovered that that's the primary way that people build wealth in the United States. And so I'm a huge advocate of helping us average bears build wealth. So that's what got me in, and that's what's kept me in, and I'm still excited about it today.
It was funny. I was a loan officer in 98 and 99. And I remember we did loans all over the country. And I would talk to people. Lived in California at the time. And I would talk to borrowers in California. And, are you a homeowner? Yes, I absolutely am. And like very much like, yes, I am a homeowner. And I get somebody in Louisiana on the phone. And I go, are you a homeowner? And they go, no. And I would say, oh, you're renting. So now I've got a purchase loan. And no, I'm going to refinance. And I'd go, but you don't own a home. And he goes, well, the bank still has the title or the deed, but I'm working on it. And it was just this entitlement almost, or this feeling of they get it. Like we hear like, oh, I own a home, when you don't really. Like you're paying on a home.
When you have a loan.
It's a mentality thing, right? Where some people just go, yeah, it's not owned yet, but how many people have a deed?
Hey, Ken, I remember how depressed I was. I was a kid, and I figured out that even when you paid off your house, you still didn't own it because of property taxes.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So you never really owned the house.
Right.
Completely. But someone said, hey, it's okay. You can figure it out. It was my grandpa. He goes, it's all right. You just have to have money in the bank to pay the taxes.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. Because my whole plan was to not have to work at some point. Have a house, have enough money I didn't have to work.
But then you'd still have to
then
pay
I found
taxes.
out, no, I'm going to have these ongoing expenses.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Interesting.
No longer depressing. It's just the reality.
Yeah. So you get out of the credit union world, you get into the mortgage world, and it's during a time that things aren't awesome. But you had a lot of stuff.
I don't think it
refi.
mattered then, honestly. When you change your career and you're doing it for the purpose of advancing your life, I don't think it matters when it happens. In fact, getting started in that business when it was tougher was probably a good thing. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I was the new guy on the block, and that August, I think I was the only one that closed any loans in the branch, and there was much more seasoned people. It's because I just didn't think about things. I just went and did the work.
You didn't know better,
that
know better in quotes, right?
Well, if you will, but I mean, it translates to today's market too. Mm-hmm. I think so many of us who've been around a while, oh my goodness, the rates are horrible. Well, compared to what? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you won't advance the things you need to do to do the business, which is just develop relationships and honestly just network and ask for the business. Mm-hmm. It's not that hard.
I'm going to do something I never do. I'm going to skip way ahead because you're bringing up what we're dealing with right now. Yeah. And I'm in a lot of conversations with people who are dealing with it. And just this morning at breakfast, we were talking about these two realtors in town, and they're both like 23. And they're crushing it. And it was so interesting hearing this, that like they're doing a lot of business, and these guys are hosting these seminars for realtors to come into, and they're featuring these realtors that are killing it. And they said that a lot of people won't come to the seminar because why would I want to hear from these young people? And he's like, because they're beating you. Like you not wanting to learn from them is part of the problem. There is something to, I don't know better. I'm just going to come in here and fight like crazy, right?
I don't know the exact story you're talking about, but I can guarantee you that those young realtors are doing something that has to do with a business plan that's been executed over and over and over again in our industry. They're probably just doing the work, mm-hmm. and they're probably doing it in an enthusiastic manner, and people are attracted to that good energy, and that's why they want to do business with them.
Yeah.
We've got numerous stories within our company even of people that are relatively new to the business in the last year and a half, and they're crushing it mm-hmm. because they're following a business plan.
It's funny, in 98 when I got in, I was fresh out of college, communications degree. I could either bag groceries or bartend, so I bartended. And I got a buddy of mine, Mark, worked for a title company. He's like, hey, I have people that are hiring over here. You want to work here? And so I went over to this loan mortgage company. I interviewed. I'm like, I don't want a desk job. I'll never sit at a desk. And interview lasted 3 hours. And I took the job. And I remember looking around the office, and I'm like, how much do these people make? Like, because you want to know. Like,
that's the question.
Yeah. And I was 23 at the time, right? So I'm like, how much does that person make? What's the person that's making the most money? Because I found out you could make as much as you want, which is weird. Show me the big dog. Yeah. And I'm like, well, if I can make how much I want, like, why does that person not make any money? And why does that person make money? Like, what's the difference? Because I'm going to be more like that person, like the one that's making money. I don't want to do what that person's doing. And it was a lot mentality of that person doesn't believe that they can do very well right now. And that person is doing well, and that momentum is keeping them afloat during difficult times. Because remember 98, 99, that was when loans started selling at like 98 instead of 103, and the whole market, shifted. But I remember thinking, I'll just do better. Like that mentality of, I didn't have the war wounds yet. And so I think it's easier almost as a young person coming in who doesn't have the benefit or the curse of having made a bunch of money.
Well, you have nowhere to go but up.
Right. But how do you get, because you coach people too.
Absolutely.
How do you get somebody who last year made $1 million in mortgage or real estate? This year, that's not on the table for them. How do you take somebody and go reset?
That's a good question. And it depends on the student because, like you say, some of the newer people who didn't have that experience, I'm coaching them on the tactical things they got to do to advance their business. The folks that were doing really well and are somewhat paralyzed, we actually work on mindset and resetting your expectations. That's what I mean by mindset.
That's hard, though.
It is, but the alternative is that you could sit there and it could get worse.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the truth. You control 4 things in your life, right? You control your thoughts, your words, your actions, and your emotions. Everything else is off the table. You don't control that. You don't control the market. So if those are the 4 items you control, then which one of those is holding you back?
Wow. Do it again. The 4 things.
Your thoughts, your words, your actions, and your emotions. That's all you got. So when you realize that and you figure, okay, if I'm going to take action, if I'm going to do something, if I'm going to impact it, these are the 4 things I can control. And so once you realize that, that's the mindset, then you don't, I think when folks say, gosh, I did so well last year, what's going wrong? That you shift in what I call a victim mentality, which is just not productive. Mm-hmm. Instead, just say, hey, what can I do today? I know this plan works. It worked before. Maybe I have to do twice as much to get the same result. Oh, well, it's still better than doing nothing and getting no result. Mm-hmm. And it's funny. There's so many things you could say, like the Wayne Gretzky, you miss 100% of shots you never take.
Right.
50% of something is better than 100% of nothing, right? I mean, figure it out any way you want, but it boils down to this, tactical things, which are your action steps. If you're going to perform well, you've got to be able to manage your emotion around it. And so the people you're talking about that had this heyday, they're probably forgetting where they came from. For me, it's really easy to go back to that first couple of years I was in the business, and I don't think you ever lose that feeling of scarcity. I call it survival mode. I mean, we've all been there. I think the average person, some people are born with wealth and maybe they don't feel that, but none of the people I grew up with and all the people I work with, at some point it was us or we were on the street. So you just get it done. And I like having that little bit of scarcity mindset. It keeps me hungry. Like you can have money in the bank and be okay, but if you don't have a little bit of that drive, you got to have something that motivates you. So whatever it happens to be. So coaching people, the folks that had the really good time and maybe they have some money in the bank, if they really want to keep going in this business, then we have to find that thing that motivates them now. Again, back to those 4 items that they can control. Is quite frankly, if you don't stop griping about the Fed, I mean, we all voted and then the politician got in there and now the politician's in there and we got to get behind that guy whether we voted for him or not. That's just the way it works. We got another shot in 4 years.
Right.
All right. Now stop whining about that and let's get on with what we can control. And I'm not making a political advancement here more than I'm just saying, hey, the reality is why spend energy on something that is not worthy of your time?
Right.
Yeah. So I say we're all about relationship anyway. So go build more relationships. Like find those 23-year-old realtors that are killing it and go become their friend and figure that out. As a lender, I would want to be one of their biggest cheerleaders in figuring that out. And if they want to work with me, great. But I would certainly say, hey, some of you other real estate agents aren't doing well. Let's take a look at what they're doing.
I still have a picture of the radical acceptance list I created. So during 2020, when I was falling apart in 2020, I had a therapist that said, he had me get a whiteboard out and he goes, on the left-hand side, write everything you can control, and the right-hand side, everything you can't. And so I did, and it's amazing how much I don't control. And
just let it go.
Yeah, and he said on the one side, the side I can't control, he said write radical acceptance, and then the other side write to-do list. And I said, well, what do I do about this radical acceptance side? He goes, you have to accept that stuff. And I said, what if I don't want to? He goes, that's why it's called radical. Like, you have to try your hardest to accept those things that you can't change. And this is kind of also in I think it's in the 12-step program too, right? Accept those things, because otherwise you're not going to work on those that are on your to-do list, because it all gets jumbled. And I remember that list really mattering for me, right? I could look at the right side and be like, well, I could change those things. Like, it really breaks it down. And really, if I was to look back at that list, they all fall into those 4 things that you mentioned. Either I wasn't having the right attitude about it, or I wasn't taking action. Yeah. So I believed I could do it, but then in the morning I would wake up and be like, but can I? Like, get that belief and then start taking those steps.
And it's liberating when you get it.
Yeah.
Not only that, so this is for everybody that's listening. Really pay attention to this part. Be more efficient with your time, because time's a real commodity.
Yeah.
And I've heard this over and over again, but I can get more money, but I can't get more time.
Right.
So be efficient with your time. If you're wasting time on something you can't control, I mean, that's just not really smart.
I've been stopping myself from reading articles, especially right now. Like, if I swipe left to get the weather on my phone, like on the iPhone, when you swipe, you get like a dashboard. The news is right there.
I got one for you. I call it a media diet.
Yeah.
Limit yourself to 20 minutes of news a day.
Oh, that's good.
Max.
Do you time block that?
I don't even hit 20 anymore.
Really?
Yeah, I'll start a story and I'm like, luckily I don't want to pay for anything, so they cut you off with an ad anyway. And when the ad comes up, I'm done.
Yeah.
Whatever's going on. No more TV.
Right.
Honestly, it sounds kind of stuffy, but it's not. I like to read the Wall Street Journal, and I'll tell you why. It's probably the most objective news you can get on both money and the world stage.
Yeah.
So you'll get some good stuff in there if you want to kind of keep in touch with what's going on. But I personally believe that the television, it just is more entertainment now.
Yeah. So outside of the 20 minutes, you now have 23 hours and 40 minutes in which to sleep and then do work.
Yeah.
What do you fill the rest of the day with?
That's a good question. So a lot of it's work, and then I make sure I have some personal time every day. This is important too, because when I wasn't doing this, I would get what I call crispy or in a bad mood or whatever you want to, cranky or whatever. And it's really important to have a little bit of personal time every day. And then hopefully you've got a loved one. I do. And so I make sure we spend some time together every day. So those are like the top priorities, is family and personal time. And then everything flows from there. Mm-hmm. But the priorities in business work like this. A new lead, new relationship is the most important thing. New business, like a new contract, is the second most important thing. Anything around prospecting or building relationship, both in and out of the company. So I think of our clients, our external clients are the borrowers and the referral sources, but our internal clients is all the people that work with us. Mm-hmm. And when I first got in the business, by example, one of the examples I was given was to just hammer on underwriters and beat up on title people and, prima donna loan officer. And it never took to me. I never felt like that. I thought, hey, you can always get, what do they say? You can get more with honey than vinegar, more flies, something like that. And I forget it. I didn't say it right. My point is,
flies with honey than
you do with vinegar.
Yeah.
But anyway, what I learned is that actually being involved in having the people that are actually supporting us in the company, like the underwriters, the funders, the processing people, all of the support staff who aren't loan officers, and so they weren't making the Mondo money in 20 and 21, but they were working their tails off. Those people, they're kind of the forgotten group, and so being in a relationship with them and pouring into them, that's all in that third category of prospecting to me. So build relationships is really, really important. And then if there's problems, which there always are, that's the last priority. Yeah. And what I found is that if you let the issue, there's always a problem in a file, or when you have a larger organization, there's usually an employee or a loan officer who is not having a good day. And if you let that emotion take over everything else that you're doing, you're stealing from another part. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad you asked what I do in the day, but I really focus on making sure that my time is used wisely, and I'm not getting caught up in emotional stuff, although I do, because if you're good at sales, you're going to have some high emotion, because that's how you connect with people. Mm-hmm. But luckily on the DISC scale, I'm also a really high D, and so I'm really good at just like focusing on the matter of fact stuff. But you got to have a heart, and you got to give it to people often when you're talking to them.
I gotta tell you, this running this podcast is so funny because it's so selfish. Like, I'm just learning from people, and for me, like, I get so much out of these things. The gold you just gave me is this priority, because everything for me is 100% priority. Like, everything's number one. And so being able to organize and figure out, okay, one of these has to be number one, and then one of these has to be number two. The way you just phrased it, you're stealing from something else.
Yeah.
If you give time to something that isn't on that priority list. I want to let that sink in for me and anybody listening, that like, I had somebody quit one time, and she said, "You drive me insane." And I said, "Why?" And one of the things she listed
That's happened to me too.
Yeah. And this is, by the way, she helped me figure out I had ADHD, because I didn't know it at the time. I guessed, I had a thought, but when she left, she gave me this list, which is basically the symptoms of ADHD. And she's like, "You will take a meeting with a balloon salesman." And I'll never forget the way she said it, because I'm like, "What are you talking about? I've not met any balloon salesman." And she goes, "If I scheduled something important for you and somebody calls up and says, 'I sell balloons, want to go to lunch?' You would go to lunch with them. And you're taking
instead
time."
of the important meeting,
yeah.
right?
She goes, "You're crushing me because I'm trying to run your schedule, and you're killing me by taking these non-priorities. But for me, the balloon salesman is a priority, because that's another human I might learn from."
That's right.
But you're saying that's accurate. Like, you can't just take anything. You need to go, is this a priority
The
for
balloon
me?
salesman will wait for you.
Right. But you already know when you start your day, these are the things that are my priority.
Yeah, I think people ask me I was coaching a group in our company, and a young up-and-comer who's doing really well, by the way. He's another guy who's running the plays, and he's doing double-digit units every month, and he hasn't even been in the business for 2 full years.
Wow.
Yeah, and he did over 10 loans in a month in his first 9 months. He's just running the play. Mm-hmm. And when I say run it, there's several things you do. And plus, he's personal, but he was doing all the things that we coach him. He goes, "Dave, how did you get to your level?" And I thought about it for a minute, and I'm like, you got to have your priorities very simple and straight, and you have to stick to a calendar. And I noticed the only time I get edgy or jiggy, if you will, is when I'm off schedule. But you look at my calendar, it's very packed. There's nothing wrong with that, but everything on there is on there for a reason. And there's I could go into a whole class about teaching time management and calendar, because I was horrible at it for most of my career. Mm-hmm. And an example is, I think there was a year of my life where I probably worked, 16 hours a day. It was ridiculous. Didn't see my kids awake I'm embarrassed to even admit it, but I don't mind telling the truth about it, because I want somebody else to learn from that mistake. And learning how to manage my time and put priorities in place made a big difference, because then nobody's really ever in perfect balance, but I'm in more balance now. And when you're in somewhat of a balance, then you have a lot more energy to give to other people, which really makes you more productive. Mm-hmm. And it makes your time more valuable. Mm-hmm. Our time is, like I said, we only have this much time. Let's use it wisely. And we're also, like I tell clients, you're only going to make so much money, so let's be efficient with it around your real estate holdings and not be wasteful. And all those things, they make sense to me. And in our business, we can do some really amazing things, both financially and with our time, but it requires focus, and it requires energy, and you have to have some organizational skills. Mm-hmm. And I think the average loan officer and realtor, they don't come into the business with those skills. Some of them do, and that's why they do really, really well. But most of them are just like, they're really good at relationship. They really like people. They're probably good at math, or they're good at real estate, or both. There's some skills that get them where they need to go. And that's that first level. But if you really want to attack it and be a true professional, you've got to turn into more of an executive, or you have to have a CEO mindset around how you use your time. Like, you run a company, and you've been through some pain, it sounds like, with some employees. Yeah. So have I. And that growth, when you get coached, you can get over that learning curve much faster, which is what's helpful about coaching. But sooner or later, if you're going to be successful, you've got to be good at managing your time. Mm-hmm. And so that's the number one thing that has made my business more productive, is getting down and dirty on that calendar and just sticking to it. And I always say, I've got to have somebody who's in charge of the calendar, they own it, and then my job is to perform. So here we are, we're doing a podcast together. In a way, we're kind of performing, but we're not, because it's a real conversation between us, and everything that's coming out is things that are true because they're in us, and it's that real knowledge that's happening. Mm-hmm. But right now we schedule this and we're doing it at the scheduled time, aren't we?
Yep.
So I'm in the zone. I'm not thinking about anything else right now. And when you're off your calendar or you're not setting your priorities, sometimes you're in the middle of a task you're supposed to be doing, but you're thinking about something else, and that's not being fully engaged. And that's the mistake I've made in the past. And that's one of the things I get to teach people is don't let that happen. You talk about ADHD. I'm sure all of us have a touch of it. I'll bet money that you've been in a conversation where you were thinking about the next thing you wanted to say and not really listening to the person you were talking to. Am I right?
Yeah.
I've done the same thing, and that's a component of not being organized, not being in the moment.
Right.
So the gift of getting good at the calendar has given me the ability to be present when you're having a conversation, which honestly, Ken, is more productive than anything else.
Yeah.
It seems like it's slower, but it's a little slow down to speed up.
Yeah.
Because then we don't have to have the conversation again, do we?
Right.
So
It's so funny. I get a bad rap for not returning text messages that fast. And what'll happen is I'll text somebody, they'll text me back, I'll text them back, they'll text me back, and then I'm on to the next thing on my calendar, and they're still texting. So I just disappear off text threads, and I get in trouble for that. People are like, "You just disappear," and I'm like, "Well, yeah, I had something I was doing at the time, and I don't want to be the person
treat
that's
it
like,
like a
yeah,
conversation.
interesting, and like keep looking at my phone when we're having a conversation. I'd like to be here for that." And I've noticed that it's awesome for me in my experience in talking to people. It kills people because we've let that get into where, why didn't you text me back? Well, I mean, I was teaching for 8 hours, so that's probably why. But there's this expectation that your day can be interrupted at any point in time, and then it's on you for not getting back. I don't know how to figure out how to, so far I'm just being me.
I've got the tactic for you.
Okay, what do you got?
So first of all, on a text, if you're in the middle of something and you got to go, I'm off to the next thing, check you later.
Yeah.
I mean, you could even have a standard, like, isn't there like a...
You can do an autoresponder.
You can do an autoresponder.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's good.
You can do that. And I think that some people, when they're texting, you're in a conversation, it's if it's a phone call.
Right.
And I have a rule about texting. If I can't get it done in 2 or 3 texts, then it's pick up the phone.
Yep. I've done that too. And it's like, why are we even texting right now? Like, let's just talk.
In my calendar, there's actually time blocked to return emails and phone calls and texts.
Really?
And that's when I do it.
Okay. So you're picking time that...
Yeah, and I allow 30 minutes for that.
Yeah.
But that's all I'm doing during that time. And so during that time, that's what I'm doing.
Nice. Okay, we're going back now because you mentioned that you were a workaholic working 16-hour days.
At least.
You've got now a different life. Take me from when you realized that was not okay, or like what made you think it was okay to go 16 hours, or did you not even think about it? It just happened. And then how'd you get out of that?
I understand the question. So I never thought it was okay. I was desperate, and that was trading time for money. Mm-hmm. And that was 2003. I don't know if you remember that era. That was like the first.
That's when I started my company.
Yeah, that was the first, if you will, in my career, real refinance boom, if you will. It felt like we refinanced the whole world then. Mm-hmm. And that was a different time, and I didn't have any assistance, and I was doing it all myself. And I had networked. That was almost probably 8th or 9th year in the business. Had a pretty good sized database by then, and plus a lot of people like me. So I was just busy. So it got to be where I would go to work at 4 a.m, and then from 8 to 5, all I did was field phone calls and deal with leads. And then after work, after 5, not after work, then I would send in, like, this is we're still in paper land most of the time. Yeah. That's when I would like fax in orders for appraisals and title requests and all that stuff and get the Transbox ready. Remember the Transbox?
I remember Transbox, yeah.
And those had to be done by a certain time, so I had time blocked for that in the afternoon. That was the only time blocking I did. Everything else was fly by the seat of my pants. And all I did was just like scoop up as much as many deals as I could. And I took everybody. And I feel good about that for one reason, because I had some good experiences done. I think a lot of people in our industry were turning folks away back then because the loan wasn't big enough, or they weren't going to make a big enough commission. But what I missed was there was a solid probably 6-month period of time where I would go 3 or 4 days without seeing my kids awake. And my son, I have 4 children, but my oldest son, he was starting his basketball career then. And he by the way, he played D1, and it he had a phenomenal college career.
Wow.
And then my son-in-law, who played with him in high school, also played D1. I actually still plays professional basketball now. And so I knew both those kids then. And I remember my son, he wasn't my son-in-law then, he was just a friend of the family. But his dad made every single one of his games.
Yeah.
And I missed probably 80% of my son's games.
Wow.
Now, he and I have a great relationship now, but I can't have that back.
Mm-hmm.
And the money I made that year, I would trade it all day long to have that time back. So that's a lesson I want everybody else to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that I was broken. And somebody in our town, and she's a competitive lender, and she invited me to go do this coaching seminar. And there was a little bit of fear. I remember because rates went up. Our company CEO came down and he gave us all this book called "Who Moved My Cheese."
I remember that.
I'm like,
Sniff and Scurry and Him and Ha.
I get what you're telling us, because I know what his job was. Like, hey, these people, they're all doing refis. Some of them were 70%, 80% refinance, and they were gone. So I got to teach them how to fish again.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was funny, and I'm like, that book is not good enough. I mean, I need something else. So I went to this seminar about coaching, and that was the beginning of my career in the core training, and I became a member of their coaching student body in January of 2004. And listen, it was a long journey, but that was the beginning of that change, and started to figure out how to run it as a business. Mm-hmm. And surrender to a coach. And the way it worked for me that I was taught is that, take the lesson from the person who's already succeeding at a higher level than you. It was really hard to pick, because we were coming off a year where there were some months where, think about this, I was by myself with one assistant who was mostly a processor. We were doing over 50 units in a month. Jeez. 3 or 4 months one year. It was just ridiculous. That was when I was working all those hours. And just to do that number of units by yourself, it's just nuts.
Right.
And I hate to say it, but I look back, I was being greedy. I was just like, but I wasn't thinking about that I was being greedy in the moment. I was thinking about, I got to take care of all these people, and this might be my only chance to make all this money to help my family, because I was still building our wealth. I still am now, but I really needed to then. Anyway, back to the coaching. I got into coaching, and I started figuring out, okay, we got to track everything, and you need some help. Plus, you got to have your time blocked. That was the beginning of that journey, and it didn't happen overnight, Ken. Mm-hmm. It took a number of years, but I got good enough where they asked me to be one of their coaches, and then as I became a coach, I got an even higher level of being trained and coached. It goes like this: I'm learning from somebody who's better than me, and then I'm teaching a whole bunch of people that want to be where I'm at, and then we all lift each other up. And it really worked well for all the time that I was doing it, and now it's become part of who I am. I think if most of us who have that kind of teacher bone in them, that you're naturally that way anyway, but when it got organized, that's when I realized, okay, you can really take this to another level. And it all boils back down to that time management, what you do with your time, and really having the right mindset around it. So that was the big change. I went from somewhat chaotic business, somebody who just was really good with people, good with numbers. I think that's a gift not everybody has. I thought that it was normal to be fast, but I think being fast with numbers really helps you in this business. Mm-hmm. And that's the raw talent. And now the skill that was built was around not just leadership, but time management and being able to have the discipline around the work and the calendar. And I'll tell you, I'm not anywhere near as good as I think I could have been or can be still. Mm-hmm. And I love that, the idea that we're always in a learning or growth mindset. I'm working on some things right now that I want to get better at. And mostly it's higher level stuff. It's around how quickly I can recover from an emotional decision or experience. Mm-hmm. And I call that the recovery rate. It used to be days, now it's literally seconds. And that's a skill set that you have to work on and develop. And I got that from somebody else who, I'm like, why did they pass me and get so much better? And that was one of the things that they were really good at. Mm-hmm. And so you look around and the people that you're associated with, and that's why it's so important to be in a good relationship with everybody you can, because they're more willing to teach you if they like you. Mm-hmm. And I think that most of us, I think that's what we're here to really do in life, is just to build relationships. So be nice, like people. Mm-hmm. Sometimes tough love or being firm is the right way to handle somebody, like with your kids, but I mean, when you're coaching somebody, but all those things. But if I'm going to pursue growth, I'm going to find somebody who is already achieving at a much higher level. And recently I went to it's actually, I guess you'd call it a training seminar. Rene Rodriguez puts on this thing called Amplify. Yeah, and he's super highly skilled. Like he studied like how the brain works and messaging and a lot of that stuff. Like me and you probably do a lot of that naturally, but he puts a little bit more science behind it, and then he has an intense, day and a half training program, and it advanced my skill set. I'm like, hey, I'm going to go do that again. And it wasn't inexpensive, but the value to me in that was that now I'm going forward, I can teach other people this at a faster pace, and I'm more on purpose about it, and I will implement it. It's going to make me more efficient. It's going to save me time. It's what it boils down to. So all the stuff that I'm learning and that I would teach other people is about how to be a little bit more efficient in your business. Like if I'm coaching somebody, a tactic I give you is designed to get a little bit more done with a little bit less time. Because again, I'll say it over and over again, that we got this much time and that's all we got. So let's be efficient with it.
Yeah.
And I can't get it back. Like the time that I didn't go to the basketball games, I can't get back all those days that I moaned about something that went wrong and I was like worried about it. And but I had no control over it. So what the heck am I worried about?
Yeah.
There's another significant thing that happened. I got to tell you guys this one. So there's a guy named Hunter Marquardt, and he writes it's a Sunday Thoughts blog. He's been doing it for years, and he wrote this one about his 100-year-old grandma, and he asked her on her 100th birthday, what lessons or what advice would you give your 44-year-old self? And this is a gal who still lived alone. I think she ran a yoga class, had a book club. You literally had to get on her schedule. Still drove herself around in her car. Yeah, like she. Think about this. That's someone who I would want to take advice from on life.
Right, totally.
And some of the things she said, well, I wouldn't put so much value on things and money. She goes, I think I made that mistake. She goes, relationships are everything, so that's what I would invest in. Be true to yourself. That's a line from Henry David Thoreau. That means not just follow your own path, but like, you know who you are. Don't change who you are because you think somebody else wants you to be something different. Just be who you are, because whatever your straight line is, what I call your fall line, that's probably your best self. All right. And then she said something else that really caught my attention. I wouldn't worry about anything anymore because all the problems always kind of work themselves out in the end. She goes, it wasn't really worth my time to worry about stuff. And I literally stopped worrying about things after that.
Really?
Yeah. That was like a huge jump forward in my, what I call the recovery rate. So then if something bugged me, I'm like, well, I know you're mad. I know you're unhappy, but I really can't control what you're saying. Here's what I can do. And whatever, if it was me, I would apologize, whatever amends I needed to make. If I had to do something financially, I would do it. I would just get it done.
Yeah.
And it's funny how liberating it was. And I went to the doctor like 2 months later. He goes, you're still fat. I said everything. He goes, but your blood pressure's lower. What are you doing? And I couldn't think of it, and I realized that's what it was.
Wow.
I just stopped worrying about stuff, and it literally, I felt better, and I didn't know why, but that was the reason why. So that's another plug for Hunter and his Sunday Thoughts. And Hunter's grandma passed away a couple of years later, which was sad, but that was a huge piece of wisdom. It was life-changing for me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I love this recovery rate, the emotional recovery rate. I've been analyzing this myself, and it's so funny. This morning I walked into the office and I said, I'm back. And I've recovered. I just went through something, that was super difficult. And this morning I woke up and I'm like, okay, I'm back. Yeah. And a lot happened, right? I had a therapy appointment yesterday that was amazing. And so a lot had to happen for me to get there. But I'm really focused on same thing as you are. I'm not fast enough yet at recovery, but it could take 2 or 3 months where I'm just like knocked down and it's tough to get up.
You've gotten wise about it. So
yeah. When knowing it exists, knowing that you're going to be back is a hard thing. And that was the conversation I had yesterday. It's like, how do I get back to being me? Because you can get really knocked, around by things. Do you have tips on recovery rate?
Yeah, I'm going to preface it. So this will sound a little metaphysical, but it's true. Yeah. There's positive and negative energy. That's how the whole universe runs. Yep. I mean, literally, that's how it works. Mm-hmm. Negative energy comes at you. You got to process it. If you take it in and don't do something with it, it actually does damage. So you've got to recognize what it is, and you've got to learn how to process it. And first of all, a lot of times, and clients can get upset about a bad experience or what they perceive, and they need to dump that energy.
Yeah.
I'd rather they dump it on me than someone else.
Right.
I've just gotten good at absorbing it, not necessarily being an empath, but like I can listen to it without taking it personal, and then they feel better.
Yeah.
And I just let it go into the ether. So when I have bad energy, I figure out what do I got to do to get that out of me. And so here's my tactics, which is what you're asking, some specific things. I have to, I used to write it down. Now I can do it mentally. I think of at least 5 things that I'm really, truly grateful for. And having a little bit of a gratitude thought is really good. Also, I have to, before I respond to anything, I have to do a 10 count. Like 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1. Because I'm highly emotional. If you ever see me driving, somebody cuts me off, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
You're counting to 10.
But I dispel that energy quickly.
Yeah.
But if I do that, and then I used to actually write down 10 things I'm grateful for, and that process itself would take away about 80% of the bad energy. Mm-hmm. Now I just do it mentally. And Robin Lavasser, she's my partner at Branch, and she's actually our EVP of sales at Summit too. And she went through this, and she learned this at an earlier age than I did, and she's kind of taught it to me. But it's just about get to your happy place fast. Mm-hmm. I always laugh about Happy Place because it reminds me of that movie Happy Gilmore.
Yes.
Remember his Happy Place? I'm not going to.
I do remember that scene.
But Carl Weathers has his hand back. He's playing. We only just be good. But anyway, just think your happy place, and I teach people that. What's your happy place? And mine changes from time to time, but it usually involves an experience with my wife or my kids or my grandkids, and that could get my head in the right spot. Mm-hmm. And then whatever's bugging me, I'm like, it's not that big a deal. And then there's one other. Ask this question. Is this really going to matter 5 years from now or not? Right. And if that answer is no, then stop now. Mm-hmm. Don't waste another minute on it. So those are some tactics for people if they need them. But you literally have to recognize that it's the energy. And sometimes you have to offset it with good energy. Mm-hmm. So if I have too many complaints or things coming at me in a day, if you will, the next time I have a break, which by the way are also scheduled, mm-hmm. I will seek out somebody who is a positive person in my life. Sometimes it's my wife. I'll just call her and tell her I love her, or talk about what we're going to have for dinner that night. I will purposely call somebody who I know is going to be a good call, mm-hmm. and then that sets me straight again. Yeah. And these are all tactics.
Right.
And I never thought about it on purpose before, Ken, but now I do. Mm-hmm. And this is what gets me through a day. Like, if I thought about how all the days of this last 9 months have been, I would say about 80% of them are pretty rough. Right. Because I'm leading people that are going through a really rough time, and P&Ls aren't looking right. I mean, all sorts of things. Compression, if you want to. We could all get into all the bad things that are happening that I don't control, mm-hmm. but how you respond to them is how I control. So, but I'll get refreshed every night, and I'll go to work the next day ready to go 100%. And I'm being very careful with myself around that, because if you're not, like having that morning routine to get set for the day, I notice when I miss doing that morning routine, that self-time, a little bit of reflection, the day is not quite as good. Mm-hmm. And there's one other thing that I think is really important, and it's selfish, but it's not. You got to find time. I think it's biblical. They have a day of rest out of every 7. Mm-hmm. I think every weekend you got to find, not the whole day, but at least 4 hours where you just do something for yourself. Mm-hmm. And I showed you guys the pictures of the cars earlier. Yeah. So I like cars, so I'll go do something with one of my cars. And that feels good to me, and it's like I'm almost like treating myself to something. Mm-hmm. It's not ice cream anymore, right? So I'm not getting it. And that makes me, and then now that I got to enjoy some time for me, then I'm ready to give back. And honestly, 4 hours a weekend will energize me for a whole week. Yeah. And so those are some tactics I've got for you, since you're asking. Those are the things that I teach people. And that's mortgage stuff? No, it's business stuff. Mm-hmm. It's life stuff. It's how mm-hmm. to run your head in the right direction so that all these other things that come at you, you can handle them well.
I'm going to do something very different now and talk to the people watching this podcast. So how many times do you read a book, and at the end of the chapter, it's like, here's some thoughts. Now write down 5 things. And you're like, that's cool. And you keep going. That's what I do, at least when I'm reading some books. I'm like, oh, cool that they put that in the end of the chapter, but I'm just going to keep reading this.
Do it.
Right. So everybody watching this, like, I want you to, or listening to this, I want you to go back and listen to those things that David just talked about, because it's so important that we write down, like, these are the things that work for me, right? And you said, you'll call somebody like that. What we call it is the owner's manual. I have a coach that's walking me through my owner's manual. Like, how do I operate at the highest level, right? And being a car guy, owner's manuals, this is where you go and figure out what kind of gas it needs. And so same thing for me. And I've written down all the things that make me the best version of myself. And like you just listed off some that are actually in my best version of myself. And yesterday in my appointment with my therapist, she's like, are you doing the things in your owner's manual? And I'm like, no. Like, of course that's why I'm a mess. Like, I know what those things are. And having them written down, I just opened my owner's manual and said, not doing that, not doing that. Well, no wonder. Like, this makes sense that I'm a wreck. And so I want everybody listening or watching this to go write down your owner's manual. Like, what are those things that work? And Aria, my daughter, business stuff is just second nature to her, and she's in college right now. And I can always call her and go, I have a business question. Can I run it by you? And she has this perspective that's so different than mine.
That's pretty cool.
That is amazing. And Avery, my youngest, I'll call when I want to laugh. And I'm like, dude, just make me laugh real fast. Like, I need that. And my son, Tate, is always good at making me laugh. But also, we'll go do a burger review. And these are the things that I know are like, these things work. And anytime I'm not doing well, I can go, well, am I running? Nope. Am I meditating? Nope. Am I listening to the right music? Nope. And like the things you listed, we know those work.
Exactly.
But we just get away from them. And if you have them written down, you go right back to it.
It's funny. When you have kids, your whole goal is to get them on a routine, isn't it?
Yeah.
On a schedule.
Yep.
You run your life by a schedule. It sounds regimented, like I don't want to be tied down to a schedule. No, it's liberating.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you better. It makes it so when you do have the free time, you actually enjoy it more.
Yeah. I
promise. I've lived both sides of this mess, and the side that I'm on now is by far the best.
Yeah. I follow my calendar as much as I can, but if it's not on the calendar, it's not going to happen. And so if I wake up and like the night before on my owner's manual, the night before I look at my calendar for the next day and I think about what that's going to feel like and what I've got going on, and I have somebody who manages my calendar. And sometimes people think that's a weakness. They're like, oh, you have to have somebody manage your calendar. It's like, no,
it's a strength.
It stops balloon salesmen. So, because the person that manages my calendar goes, well, that's not going to work. And you need time here. And I float. That's one of the things that I do that makes my best self. And I do these float tank experiences. So I'll be an hour just floating.
No, you have
water.
Open time.
Yeah. But that's got to be scheduled. And I need somebody else to do it because I will get so caught up in things that I won't think about that. And so having somebody else manage it is the way that I go, okay, I just have to do whatever's there. And if it doesn't get there, it's not getting done. And it's been amazing operating off the calendar.
It's okay, though. Listen, one of the rules, since you brought it up, of managing a calendar is somebody else is in charge of the calendar. I learned to say, hey, you own this calendar. You own the calendar. My job is to perform on the calendar. Mm-hmm. So, like, do you think Frank Sinatra, he managed his calendar?
Right.
No, he would show up, walk out on stage and perform, and then he would leave, and somebody else would wipe off the mic and pick up his cigarettes or whatever that was going on.
Yeah.
Not that we're Frank Sinatra, but you have to think, like, if you're going to be in a leadership command position and you have the ability to have an assistant, that's what they're do. That's their job. And by the way, hire somebody whose skill set is organization. Mm-hmm. It knows how to do that. I literally call my assistant Taylor. She's my babysitter. She's as young as my youngest daughter, but she keeps me in control.
It was so funny. Is she the one that you were talking about this morning? We're like,
yes.
We're doing this and this and that, and you're like, okay. Like
whatever.
It's whatever she said I'm doing is what I'm doing. Right. You have to release control of that and go, okay, these are the things.
My job is to show up and be good at having my head straight on and performing. Mm-hmm. And so I'm ready for whatever comes down the pipe, and I'll handle it no matter what it is, because I don't have to think about managing the time around it.
Right.
And those breaks that I have, she'll come and say, hey, you have a break then. If I need that break that day, I'll say, no, don't stomp on it. If she goes, well, I need to squeeze something in there. Great, 15 minutes. You can have 15 of that 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. And she'll do that during the day. And that's part of the management and dance of managing the calendar. But that's what I do. And I recommend anybody else who has an assistant, that's what you do. Because it does make you more efficient. And I use that term liberating. What I mean is you liberate yourself from your own bondage and don't hold yourself back.
I love it. All right, we're going to go shoot some other classes.
Cool.
This has been amazing.
Did we get something good? We didn't really talk mortgage.
So good. We don't have to talk mortgage. We'll do classes in the back in the other studio on mortgage because that's important. But for me, here's what's been happening with this podcast. your voice will be in my head when I
Okay.
need to go back to the owner's manual. And I know for people listening to this, like, they need that voice of like, it's going to be okay, but like, go back to, am I doing the things it takes? Am I doing my part? Am I controlling the things I can control? Am I letting go of the things I can't control? That will be in people's heads and going, okay, I can do this. And no matter what people do for a living, they need that skill, because I think being able to manage your time, not getting too committed to things. I love the parent, the lesson for parents out there, because I know there's people like we're talking about, the 23-year-old is going to run into this,
Yes.
where they are so committed that they lose time with their kids, and you can't get that back. And I think all of those lessons are like, that's what I'm trying to pull out of people is, how do we do this? Because the best part of getting older, because a lot of stuff sucks, right? The best part of getting older,
the body parts.
if we're going to find some good things, it's you have the wisdom of having been through some things, and you're not going to go back and make those mistakes, but you're also running out of time to make those mistakes, right? So what can we then pass down to that next generation where we go, hey, don't do this. Like, don't get caught up in this. And because the hard part about getting older is you don't know what you did wrong until you get older, and something happens where you're like, oh no.
I think they call that wisdom.
It is. And I hate that you have to wait so long for it. I would have really loved it earlier, but.
Well, I have one more plug that's really important. Surrendering to coaching and always having in a growth mindset and being coached, that's been a critical part of my growth. And seeking out other coaches, not just in the mortgage business, but other parts. I think that's so important. And those are wise people. They impart the wisdom. And then I have to, when I use that word surrender, it means pay attention and actually do what you're told.
Yep.
Like if you're going to ask for advice, especially if you're going to pay for it, for God's sakes, do what they tell you.
Yeah.
They're not telling you, somebody you're paying for advice is not giving you bad advice on purpose.
Right.
They're giving you good advice that you're paying for, so do whatever they tell you. Let's go over those things real quick. The ones you control are your thoughts, your words, your actions, and your emotions. That's all you got. Then have your priorities figured out. For me, it's new business or leads are number one. New contracts or whatever is coming in the door right now is number two. So if I have a new lead call and I have a new contract, I'm going to talk to the lead first. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then number three is all the prospecting, relationship building. That's always important. And then problems are last. And I find that most people let the problem become their number one priority, and it pushes all this other stuff out of the way. That's part of time management. So whatever your priority list is, just make sure you write it down. You can copy mine. It seems to work for everybody that I coach. And then surrender to a calendar. That was the hardest part for me, because I love thinking I'm self-employed. I can do what I want. I'm going to run it the way I want to. Well, that's a chaotic mess. And I told you the story about what happened to me. So if you do that, you actually end up with a better life, and you get more enjoyable, what I call downtime or free time.
Yep. Awesome. Let's go in the back and film some stuff for the Knowledge Coop. And man, I appreciate you spending time here.
I appreciate you. Thank you, Ken.
Yeah.